The red wine splashed across my new silk dress, a dark, blossoming stain against the pale fabric. I stared at it, frozen, as the ruby liquid seeped into the delicate threads. My sister-in-law, Bethany Sterling, stood before me, a look of wide-eyed innocence plastered on her face. "Oh, my goodness, Olivia, how terribly clumsy of me," she chirped, though her eyes held a gleam of something less innocent, almost triumphant. My brother Ethan, Bethany's husband, rushed over, towel in hand, his face etched with concern. "Liv, are you okay? Bethany, what happened?" he asked, clearly flustered. Our mother, Alina, emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron, her gaze falling first on the stain, then on Bethany's theatrical apologies. This was supposed to be a joyous family celebration, our parents' 40th wedding anniversary, held at their beautifully decorated home. Yet here I was, dripping in red wine, my new dress ruined, and my sister-in-law's saccharine apologies ringing in my ears. What happened next, you ask? To find out how this unusual celebration unfolded, leave or drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button to hear what happened later in the story. My new silk dress, a pale, flowing canvas for an evening I'd hoped would be filled with genuine warmth, became a grim tableau as the ruby liquid blossomed across my chest. The stain, a dark, angry rose unfurling against the soft ivory, spread quickly, soaking into the delicate threads of the fabric. I stood there, frozen in a tableau of disbelief and quiet exasperation, as the sharp, earthy aroma of aged Cabernet mingled incongruously with the delicate scent of fresh lilies in a vase on the nearby console table. My sister-in-law, Bethany Sterling, stood before me, a picture of exaggerated dismay, her slender hands fluttering theatrically near her perfectly coiffed blonde hair. "Oh, my goodness, Olivia. How terribly clumsy of me," she exclaimed, her voice pitched just a touch too high, a saccharine sweetness that grated on my nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard. Yet even through her feigned distress, her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, held a glint of something less innocent, almost triumphant, a flicker of satisfaction that made my stomach churn. Ethan, my brother, Bethany's husband, materialized beside me in an instant, a pristine linen napkin clutched uselessly in his hand. His brow was deeply furrowed with genuine concern, his kind face a mask of bewilderment. "Liv, are you okay? Bethany, what happened?" he queried, his voice laced with confusion, as if he genuinely couldn't comprehend how his seemingly perfect wife, so poised and gracious, could be responsible for such a blatant act. He looked from the spreading stain on my dress to Bethany's overly dramatic performance, a bewildered expression settling on his features. Our mother, Alina Hayes, a woman of quiet strength and impeccable grace, emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a floral apron. Her gaze swept from the spreading crimson on my dress to Bethany's theatrically contorted face, and I saw a shadow of uncertainty, a fleeting flicker of disquiet, cross her otherwise serene features. This was supposed to be a momentous occasion, a joyous family celebration, our parents' 40th wedding anniversary, a milestone that deserved nothing but peace and pure happiness. The house, meticulously decorated with twinkling fairy lights and cascades of white roses, shimmered with an air of anticipated festivity. Yet here I was, dripping in red wine, my new dress irrevocably marred, and Bethany's insincere apologies echoing through the grand hall, a jarring overture to the night's unfolding drama. The public nature of the incident, witnessed by a few early arrivals who now shifted uncomfortably, only heightened my sense of acute embarrassment. I managed a weak, strained smile, a desperate attempt to appear unbothered as I mumbled, "It's fine, Bethany. Just an accident." The words felt hollow, devoid of conviction, as if I were trying to convince myself more than her. My father, Robert Hayes, a man of quiet observation and deep empathy, immediately sensed my distress. Without a word, he unbuttoned his own blazer, a fine cashmere blend, and offered it to me. "Here, honey, cover that up for now," he said, his eyes conveying a silent sympathy that warmed me, a stark contrast to Bethany's cold performance. He always had a knack for sensing my inner turmoil, a quiet strength that had been my anchor through many family storms. Bethany, however, continued her performance, her lamentations growing louder, drawing more attention from the few early arrivals who were now openly staring. "I'm just so mortified. Olivia, I feel absolutely dreadful. Let me get you something else to wear. I have a lovely gown upstairs that might fit you, darling, a beautiful cerulean silk." The offer, delivered with a forced cheerfulness that bordered on manic, felt like another subtle jab. A reminder that she, the perfect hostess, always had a solution, even for a problem she herself had meticulously created. She seemed to revel in the opportunity to play the gracious benefactor, to showcase her supposed generosity and superior wardrobe. Just as I was about to retreat to a quiet corner, seeking refuge from the awkward glances and the suffocating perfume of Bethany's feigned remorse, chaos erupted from the kitchen. A high-pitched yelp, followed by a series of frantic, joyful barks, tore through the polite, strained chatter emanating from the dining room. A collective gasp rippled through the small group gathered, their attention immediately diverted from my wine-stained predicament to the sudden commotion. "Buster!" Eleanor exclaimed, her voice laced with a mixture of surprise and genuine exasperation. Our usually docile golden retriever, Buster, a creature of calm obedience and predictable habits, had somehow miraculously managed to breach the sanctity of the kitchen gate. That barrier, a sturdy wooden one, had been meticulously put in place precisely to prevent canine intrusions during important family events, especially with Bethany's prized dessert on display. A second later, a wave of stunned silence fell over the room as we peered into the kitchen, witnessing the scene that unfolded before our disbelieving eyes. Buster stood triumphantly amidst the ruins of what moments ago had been Bethany's crowning glory for the evening. Her meticulously decorated, prize-winning chocolate cake, now reduced to a slobbery, half-eaten mess. His tail, a golden blur of pure canine joy, wagged furiously, scattering crumbs and dark chocolate frosting across the sparkling tiled floor, a scene of blissful canine anarchy. Bethany, whose entire afternoon had been consumed by the intricate crafting of this particular dessert, a triumph she had bragged about incessantly for weeks, detailing the layers, the ganache, the delicate edible flowers, let out a piercing shriek. Her face, moments ago composed in feigned remorse over my dress, contorted into a mask of genuine horror and utter disbelief. "My cake! Buster, you horrid dog!" she wailed, rushing towards the kitchen as if to physically prevent further destruction, her perfectly manicured hands flailing in despair. She looked truly, utterly devastated. The irony of the situation was not lost on me, even in my discomfort. While my dress was ruined, a simple, replaceable item that could be cleaned or discarded, Bethany's meticulously crafted masterpiece, the centerpiece of her efforts to impress our parents and all their guests, was now a slobbery, half-eaten monument to canine opportunism. It was a small, fleeting moment of bizarre, poetic justice, a strange, unexpected counterpoint to the simmering tension that always seemed to follow Bethany into any room. A tiny, mischievous smile tugged at the corner of my lips, quickly suppressed, as I watched Bethany's perfectly coiffed image crack, revealing a flicker of raw, unadulterated anger beneath her polished veneer, a testament to her priorities. Growing up, Ethan and I shared an unbreakable bond, a sibling duo often found whispering secrets and concocting grand adventures in the sprawling, leafy backyard of our parents' colonial-style home. He was my confidant, my first friend, and our relationship, built on years of shared laughter, quiet understanding, and unwavering support, felt impervious to external forces, a solid foundation in my life. We were thick as thieves, navigating childhood's complexities with an unspoken complicity that only siblings who truly see each other possess. Our parents, Eleanor and Robert Hayes, fostered an environment of quiet encouragement, allowing us the freedom to explore our individual interests and pursue our passions without undue pressure. For me, that meant a deep dive into the vibrant world of art and design, a path that always felt inherently mine, something intrinsically linked to my spirit, a source of profound joy and purpose. I'd spend hours sketching, painting, and creating, lost in my own world, yet always feeling the quiet support of my family. Then came Bethany Sterling. Ethan met her during his final year of graduate school, a whirlwind romance that culminated in a seemingly sudden engagement. She entered our lives like a perfectly wrapped gift, seemingly flawless and undeniably charming. Her smile was incandescent, a dazzling flash of pearly whites, her manners impeccable, her laughter a melodic chime that instantly captivated everyone in her orbit. She possessed an effortless grace, a polished poise that immediately drew our parents' admiration. Eleanor, ever eager for her children to find happiness and expand our small family, was particularly enamored. "She's just so polished, Olivia," she'd often remark, a hint of admiration in her voice that, even then, sparked a tiny, inexplicable pang of unease in my chest. There was something about Bethany's perfection that felt manufactured, too smooth, too carefully presented. Robert, more reserved and cautious by nature, nonetheless seemed pleased by Ethan's obvious happiness and Bethany's seemingly earnest desire to become a fully integrated part of our family, often remarking on her meticulous planning skills and her attentiveness to their needs. In those early days of Bethany's integration into our family, her charm was undeniable, a potent force that seemed to effortlessly absorb her into the very fabric of our gatherings. She'd arrive laden with thoughtful, often expensive, gifts, perfectly tailored to each person's preferences, seemingly remembering every small detail from casual conversations we'd had months ago. She always volunteered to help Eleanor in the kitchen, offering to host holidays, or taking on the meticulous planning of elaborate family events responsibilities that had once been shared more organically between Ethan, myself, and our parents. She moved with an almost ethereal grace, always anticipating needs, always offering assistance. Slowly, subtly, she began to position herself as the quintessential daughter-in-law, the one who truly understood family traditions, who possessed the organizational prowess and social graces our family supposedly lacked. This quiet, almost imperceptible shift began to push me to the periphery, not overtly, but through a series of small, accumulating acts. If I suggested a menu item for a family dinner, Bethany would gently redirect with a honeyed tone. "Oh, darling, that's a lovely idea, but Eleanor and I have already planned a classic roast beef with all the trimmings. We just adore tradition, don't we?" If I offered to help decorate for a holiday, she'd smile sweetly and say, "It's all taken care of, Liv, you just relax. We know how busy your freelance work keeps you, you artistic soul. You shouldn't burden your beautiful mind with such trivialities." The comments were never overtly malicious, never delivered with a frown or a sharp edge, but they carried a subtle undertone of dismissal, a quiet implication that my contributions were somehow less valuable, less refined, or simply unnecessary. My parents, caught up in the whirlwind of Bethany's perfect performance, rarely seemed to notice the subtle exclusion. Bethany also had a knack for weaving herself into the family narrative, often subtly reshaping shared memories to her advantage, or subtly diminishing my role in them. She'd recount anecdotes from Ethan's childhood, carefully omitting my presence or subtly altering details to elevate her own perceived understanding of him, as if she had been there all along. "Ethan always loved trains," she'd declare to dinner guests, her hand resting affectionately on his arm. "He told me about that wooden set his father bought him. He'd spend hours building intricate tracks." She never mentioned that it was I who had spent countless hours with him on the living room floor, meticulously designing and building those elaborate tracks, bringing his imaginary world to life. She'd comment on my career as a freelance artist and designer with a condescending sweetness, a veiled pity in her voice. "It's so wonderful you get to express yourself, Olivia. It must be so freeing not to have the pressures of a real job, like Ethan and I do in the corporate world." The implication was clear. My artistic pursuits were charming, frivolous hobbies, while her corporate ascent and Ethan's steady engineering job were marks of true success, maturity, and financial stability. These subtle slights, delivered with a dazzling smile and often unnoticed by Ethan or my parents, chipped away at my sense of belonging, sowing insidious seeds of doubt about my place within the tightly knit family unit. It felt like watching a slow, graceful dance of erasure, where my footprint was systematically being wiped away. My grandmother, Aliner's mother, had been the true matriarch of our family, a woman of fierce independence, quiet wisdom, and an undeniable artistic spirit. She had nurtured my early love for drawing and painting, recognizing a kindred spirit within me. I'd spend entire afternoons with her in her sun-drenched studio, sketching still lifes or simply talking about color and light. Our bond was special, unique, forged in shared creative passion and a quiet understanding that transcended words. It was during these cherished moments that she often spoke of a particular sapphire locket, a delicate antique that had belonged to her own mother, a piece passed down through generations. "This locket, Olivia," she would say, holding it up to the light, its facets catching the sun, "carries the whispers of generations, the dreams of the women who wore it. It should belong to someone who understands beauty beyond material value, someone who sees the world with a painter's eye, someone who truly feels its story like you do." Though she never explicitly stated it in her formal will, her words resonated deeply within me, embedding the unwavering belief that this locket, this exquisite piece of family history, was destined for me. It was more than just an object. It was a profound symbol of our shared artistic legacy, a tangible piece of her love, encouragement, and the quiet blessing she had bestowed upon my creative path. This implicit promise became a quiet comfort, a secret understanding between my grandmother and me, cementing my sense of belonging within the family's creative and emotional lineage. When Grandma Aliner passed away last year, her absence left a gaping void that permeated every corner of our family's life, a silence where her vibrant presence once resonated. Her funeral was a somber affair, a gathering tinged with the bittersweet remembrance of a life exceptionally well lived, but also shadowed by an unspoken tension that had begun to creep into our family dynamics long before her final illness. The reading of her will, a necessary formality that followed a few weeks later, was conducted in the quiet solemnity of the lawyer's office, a place of hushed tones and sterile efficiency. It was a straightforward document, meticulously detailing the distribution of her assets, her cherished possessions, and her charitable bequests. But to my profound dismay and a sudden, sharp pang in my chest, there was no explicit mention of the sapphire locket. My heart sank, a heavy stone settling deep in my chest. I had always assumed, based on Grandma's whispered promises, her lingering gazes at the locket when I was near, and our countless conversations about its beauty and history, that it would be mine. It wasn't just about the object itself, its monetary value, which I knew was considerable, but the profound emotional weight it carried, a tangible link to her artistic spirit, her quiet rebellion against convention, and the unique bond we shared. It was a symbol, a beacon of her love and unwavering belief in my creative path, a physical representation of an unspoken legacy. Before I could even voice my unspoken expectation, before the words could form on my tongue, Bethany, with practiced ease and a quick, almost imperceptible glance at Ethan, stepped smoothly into the conversational void. Her voice was light and casual, yet deliberately audible to everyone in the small, hushed room. "Oh, that lovely old locket," she exclaimed, her tone brimming with a feigned fondness, as if she'd cherished it herself for years. "Grandma always said I reminded her of her youth, always so proper and well-dressed, always putting family first. I suppose she would have wanted it to go to someone who appreciates its classic elegance, something that fits our family's more traditional aesthetic, something truly deserving of a place of honor." Her words, delivered with a dazzling, almost innocent smile, felt like a swift, elegant blow, precisely aimed. She wasn't just claiming the locket. She was subtly reinterpreting Grandma's intentions, twisting them to fit her own narrative, subtly implying that my own artistic, perhaps less proper, or more unconventional aesthetic made me entirely unsuitable for such a venerable heirloom. Ethan shifted uncomfortably beside her, his shoulders tensing, but said nothing, his usual assertiveness conspicuously absent, his gaze fixed on the lawyer's neutral face. My parents, still steeped in the raw, aching grief of losing a leaner, seemed to register Bethany's statement as a natural progression, a fitting and logical claim for the daughter-in-law who had so tirelessly ingratiated herself into their good graces, always present, always helpful. I bit back the sharp retort that threatened to escape my lips, my jaw clenching. The raw grief over losing Grandma was still too fresh, too overwhelming, too visceral to engage in a public dispute over a piece of jewelry in a lawyer's office. I chose silence, a desperate attempt to preserve some semblance of peace amidst the profound sorrow, to not add further pain to my parents' grief. But my silence, it turned out, was misinterpreted as indifference, or perhaps even an unspoken admission of her superior claim. Bethany, emboldened by the lack of immediate challenge, began to subtly, but consistently, flaunt the locket. She'd wear it to every family gathering, its deep blue sapphires glinting conspicuously against her impeccably chosen outfits, drawing admiring comments from unsuspecting relatives who had no idea of its true sentimental significance to me. Each compliment, each casual observation of its beauty felt like a fresh wound, a constant reminder of what I felt was rightfully mine, a powerful symbol of a promise that had been subtly, maliciously stolen from me. She would casually bring it up in conversation, her voice dripping with affected sentimentality. "Isn't Grandma's locket just divine? It's so lovely to carry a piece of her with me, especially since she always said I was the one who truly understood her traditional values and cared about family legacy." The narrative she was crafting was clear, insidious, and devastatingly effective. She was painting herself as the true inheritor of Grandma's legacy, the one who truly understood and embodied her spirit, pushing me further and further to the periphery. As Bethany's hold on the family narrative tightened, my isolation within the family circle began to deepen, becoming an increasingly painful reality. She excelled at subtle manipulation, weaving a complex web of half-truths, carefully constructed implications, and outright omissions that painted me in an increasingly unfavorable light. Conversations would subtly shift to my perceived lack of family commitment, because my freelance art career often meant I wasn't always available for impromptu gatherings she orchestrated. Gatherings that felt less like family events and more like carefully staged performances for Bethany's benefit. "Olivia's just so busy with her art," she'd sigh dramatically to Alina and Robert, her voice dripping with a feigned understanding that hid a sharp edge of condescension. "She's so passionate, it's almost like she forgets about us sometimes, doesn't she? Poor dear, she's so consumed by her creative pursuits she barely has time for real life." My parents, constantly bombarded by Bethany's seemingly helpful nature, her endless volunteerism, and her carefully curated image as the perfect daughter-in-law, started to echo her sentiments, albeit softly and with a touch of reluctance. "You know, Olivia, Bethany really steps up for these things," Alina would say, a gentle reproof in her tone, a silent comparison that stung deeply. The insidious whispers and veiled criticisms chipped away at their perception of me, creating a distance that hurt more profoundly than any direct confrontation ever could. I was watching my once secure and cherished place in the family, once so vibrant and undeniable, subtly erode and disappear under Bethany's polished, relentless, and truly malevolent influence. The growing distance between my parents and me became an aching, palpable reality, a quiet chasm that widened with each passing week. Whenever I called Alina, hoping for a return to our easy, open conversations, the kind we'd always shared, I found a subtle coolness, a guardedness in her voice that I couldn't quite place, a hesitation before she fully engaged with me. She'd often steer the conversation towards Bethany's latest acts of thoughtfulness, her meticulously planned dinners, her diligent organization of family documents, her unwavering presence at their side, always ready to lend a hand, always seemingly so selfless. "Bethany is such a blessing, Olivia," Alina would often remark, a touch of wonder and deep gratitude in her voice. "She truly understands what it means to be family, to care for those you love. She's simply indispensable." The words, seemingly innocuous, carried a sharp, veiled comparison, a quiet implication that I, with my less structured freelance life and fiercely independent spirit, was somehow falling short, that I was less devoted, less caring. If I tried to express my feelings about the locket or any other slight that had festered in my mind, it was gently but firmly dismissed, as if my concerns were trivial or an annoyance. "Oh, darling, it's just an old thing. Bethany loves it so much, and you know how she cherishes family heirlooms. It's so sweet how she's taken to carrying Grandma's legacy," Eleanor would say, her voice tinged with a mild exasperation, as if my deep, profound attachment to a sentimental object was a childish preoccupation, a foolish fixation. "Don't make a fuss, dear. It's not worth upsetting the peace." Robert, my father, usually more discerning and less easily swayed, also seemed subtly influenced by Bethany's constant presence and seemingly selfless devotion. He'd nod along with Eleanor's pronouncements about Bethany, and his once comforting, knowing presence now felt tinged with a quiet disappointment I couldn't articulate, a sadness I felt I was causing. It felt as though Bethany had managed to weave a delicate, almost invisible veil of doubt between my parents and me, obscuring their clear vision of our relationship and replacing it with a distorted image of my character. The most painful part of this slow erosion was the increasing strain on my relationship with Ethan. He was my brother, my rock, my first true confidant, and yet he seemed utterly oblivious to the subtle, insidious manipulation unfolding around him. Or perhaps it was not oblivion, but a profound unwillingness to see, a blind loyalty to his wife. Bethany had a masterful way of isolating me, subtly intercepting messages, forgetting to relay invitations to family gatherings she meticulously organized, or spinning my absence from events into elaborate tales of my supposed disinterest or even rudeness. Olivia said she was far too busy with her art to join us for the weekend, something about a big commission she couldn't possibly postpone. Bethany would casually mention to our parents, painting me as aloof, self-involved, and uncommitted to family, when in reality I had never even received the invitation she had supposedly extended, or it had arrived days after the RSVP deadline. Ethan, hearing these repeated narratives from his wife, began to internalize them, accepting Bethany's version of events without questioning, simply because she was his wife, and she sounded so genuinely concerned. He loved Bethany, and in his loyalty, he seemed to have developed a devastating blind spot for her less savory traits, for the subtle barbs she lobbed my way. When I tried, hesitantly, to bring up my concerns to him, he'd either dismiss them as sibling jealousy, a common enough dynamic, he'd argue, or attribute Bethany's actions to her overenthusiasm and good intentions. "Bethany just tries really hard, Liv," he'd say, a touch of defensiveness in his voice. "She means well. She loves Mom and Dad, she just wants to make sure everything is perfect for them. You know how she is." His unwavering defense of her, even when faced with my quiet distress, left me feeling profoundly alone, questioning my own perceptions and even my sanity. One crisp autumn evening, however, a tiny, almost imperceptible crack appeared in Bethany's carefully constructed facade, a moment that Ethan, unbeknownst to her, witnessed. He had returned home unexpectedly early from work, intending to surprise Bethany with takeout from their favorite restaurant, a rare treat. As he approached the living room, he heard her voice, sharp and laced with disdain, emanating from within. She was on the phone, her words spilling into the quiet evening air. "Honestly, Eleanor," Bethany was saying, her voice a low, venomous hiss, "Olivia is just obsessed with that old locket. It's ridiculous. It's not even in the will. She's so dramatic, constantly bringing it up, making it seem like she was robbed. It's exhausting. She needs to let it go. Honestly, Ethan and I just want to make sure you two have peace, and her constant need for attention disrupts everything, making you worry unnecessarily. You don't need that stress." Ethan froze in the doorway, the takeout bag clutched in his hand, his heart sinking with a terrible dread. He listened, utterly aghast, as his wife continued to subtly twist the truth about my passion for the locket into an ugly obsession, making it sound as though I was greedy and ungrateful, rather than deeply sentimental and hurt. She was feeding Alina a carefully crafted, insidious narrative, painting me as petulant, difficult, and demanding. The casual cruelty in her voice, the deliberate misrepresentation of my character, the blatant lies, it was all laid bare in that unguarded moment. He heard the manipulative tone, the dismissive attitude, and the sheer audacity of her lies about me, his own sister. He didn't interrupt, he just stood there, listening, letting the ugly, undeniable truth wash over him, suddenly seeing his wife in a terrifyingly new light. It was as if a thick, heavy curtain had been ripped away, revealing the grotesque truth he had so willingly ignored. That night, after Bethany had ended her call and gone about her evening rituals, seemingly oblivious to Ethan's silent, stunned presence in the doorway, he found himself utterly restless and profoundly disturbed. He lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words in his mind, the casual venom with which she had spoken about me, his sister. It wasn't just a misunderstanding or a slip of the tongue. It was deliberate malice, a calculated act of sabotage. He thought back to countless subtle incidents over the years, moments he had dismissed as quirks or misunderstandings, now suddenly illuminated by the harsh, unforgiving light of Bethany's true character. My distant responses to some of his texts, my occasional absences from family dinners that he had simply assumed I chose not to attend, my quiet withdrawal from family planning and celebrations, all of it clicked into place with a horrifying clarity. He suddenly understood why I had seemed so hurt, so isolated, so guarded. The anger that simmered within him was directed not just at Bethany, but at himself for his devastating blindness, for his unwavering trust in her deceptive charm, for allowing his own sister to suffer under his roof, under his nose. He felt a cold dread settle in his stomach, a gnawing remorse that made him physically ache. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that he had to do something. His family, was splintering, and Bethany was the insidious, corrosive force behind it. He had to act, and he had to act decisively. His newfound suspicion ignited a furious resolve within him, transforming him from a passive observer into a determined investigator. He felt a deep, overwhelming need to uncover every layer of Bethany's deception, to understand the full extent of the damage she had inflicted. He started by reviewing old email chains he was copied on, meticulously sifting through years of communications between Bethany and Alina regarding family gatherings. He found multiple instances where Bethany had explicitly, yet subtly, suggested dates or themes for events that she knew I couldn't attend due to my freelance work commitments, then feigned surprise and disappointment when I was absent. She had carefully crafted a scenario where my absence always appeared to be my own choice, my own lack of commitment. More damningly, he discovered a series of deleted text messages on Bethany's old phone, a phone she had forgotten to wipe before eagerly switching to a newer model. These messages, painstakingly recovered, painted an even darker, more sinister picture. In one thread with Alina, Bethany had fabricated an entire conversation, claiming I had called Alina ungrateful for a gift she had made for her, and scoffed at a cherished family recipe, twisting my words beyond recognition, inventing outright insults. Another thread detailed Bethany's strategic advice to Alina on how to handle my supposed sensitivity regarding the locket, subtly framing my genuine attachment as a greedy obsession, a petulant demand for material possessions. The sheer audacity of her lies, laid bare in cold, digital print, sent a shiver of profound disgust down his spine. This wasn't just passive aggression. It was active, malicious deception, carefully orchestrated to alienate me from our parents and cement her own position as the favored, indispensable daughter-in-law. The most damning piece of evidence, however, revolved around the sapphire locket, the very heart of my quiet suffering. Ethan recalled Grandma's quiet hints to me, the way she'd always held the locket and looked at me, a silent testament to a future inheritance that everyone seemed to implicitly understand. Bethany, knowing this unspoken promise, had deliberately planted seeds of doubt, weaving a narrative designed to undermine my claim. Ethan discovered a crucial communication from Bethany to Alina, subtly suggesting that Grandma, in her later years, might have been a bit confused about her intentions, implying that the locket's proper place was with Bethany, who, as she often reminded everyone, truly understood Grandma's traditional values and cared about the family's legacy in the right way. It was a cynical, calculating manipulation of a grieving family, playing on their vulnerabilities and their emotional state to gain possession of an item that held such deep, profound sentimental value for me. The weight of this discovery settled heavily on Ethan's shoulders, a crushing realization of his wife's true character. His wife was not just petty, she was a master manipulator, willing to twist truths and exploit emotional bonds for her own selfish gain. He understood now the quiet pain in my eyes, the subtle, almost imperceptible shift in Alina's demeanor towards me, and the deep, silent chasm that had opened between us, a chasm that had been deliberately created by Bethany. The realization ignited a furious, burning resolve within Ethan. He had to confront Bethany, not just for my sake, but for the integrity of their family, for the very essence of truth and trust that had been so grievously violated. He couldn't allow his wife's poisonous influence to continue tearing us apart, to continue corroding the very foundation of his family. But more importantly, he knew he had to stand by me unequivocally, publicly, without hesitation. My quiet suffering, his unwitting complicity in it, weighed heavily on his conscience, a constant, sharp reminder of his failure to protect me. He understood that a private confrontation with Bethany would likely lead to more gaslighting, more tears, more manipulation, more false promises. No, this had to be public, undeniable, an undeniable exposé. The evidence he had meticulously gathered was too damning to be dismissed or twisted. He envisioned the moment, the shock on Bethany's face, the dawning, painful realization on our parents' faces as the truth was laid bare. It would be painful, messy, and deeply uncomfortable, but it was absolutely necessary. He felt a surge of protectiveness for me, his sister, and a desperate desire to reclaim the honest, loving family they had once been. This confrontation, he knew, would either mend the family or irrevocably break it, but the lies could no longer be allowed to fester, to continue to destroy us from within. The time for truth had come. The plan solidified in Ethan's mind, born of a mixture of raw guilt, furious determination, and an overwhelming desire to restore the truth. He approached me quietly later that evening, after Bethany had excused herself to make some important calls for her volunteer committee work, giving us a precious window of privacy. His face was etched with a somber expression, the gravity of his purpose clear in his eyes. He motioned for me to follow him into his study, a room usually filled with the comforting scent of old books and the hum of his computer. "Liv," he began, his voice low, almost a whisper, "I have something to show you. Something I should have seen a long time ago. Something I should have protected you from." He opened his laptop, his fingers hovering over the trackpad before he finally clicked. He laid out the damning evidence before me, a digital paper trail of Bethany's calculated malice. There were screenshots of deleted texts he'd recovered from her old phone, messages to Alina, meticulously crafted to twist my words, to paint me as ungrateful, demanding, and dismissive of their efforts. He showed me carefully dated notes from conversations he'd overheard, whispers to other relatives, subtly undermining my character, chipping away at my reputation. There were forwarded emails that revealed Bethany's strategic planning of family gatherings, always choosing dates she knew I had existing commitments, then feigning disappointment at my absence to our parents. Each piece of evidence was a fresh stab of pain, a visceral reminder of the loneliness and confusion I had felt for years. But beneath the hurt, there was a profound sense of validation, a powerful wave of relief. The nameless dread, the constant questioning of my own perceptions, it all finally had a name, a face: Bethany's calculated, insidious malice. Tears streamed down my face, a mixture of hurt, anger, and an overwhelming sense of vindication that I hadn't been imagining it, that I wasn't crazy. "Ethan, all this time?" I choked out, the words catching in my throat, a lifetime of suppressed pain finally surfacing. He nodded, his eyes filled with a deep, aching remorse. "I'm so sorry, Liv, I was blind. I was so incredibly blind." In that moment, our bond, frayed by years of Bethany's interference, by the subtle corrosion of her lies, snapped back into place, stronger than ever. The unspoken understanding between us was palpable. We were a united front, ready to face whatever came next. We decided the 40th anniversary celebration, still underway in the main living area despite the minor wine and cake mishaps from earlier, was the perfect, albeit painful, stage. The entire immediate family was present. Our parents, Alina and Robert, our own small family unit, and Bethany, who by this point had returned from her cake-related distress, composed but still visibly agitated, her eyes occasionally darting towards the kitchen, as if expecting Buster to reappear. The dining room, once a haven of laughter and warmth, was now charged with an almost electric, unspoken tension. Ethan cleared his throat, the sound surprisingly loud in the hushed room, drawing everyone's attention. "There's something important we need to discuss," he announced, his voice steady despite the almost imperceptible tremor in his hands, his gaze sweeping across each family member's face. Bethany's eyes narrowed, a flicker of apprehension, almost a premonition, crossing her perfectly composed features. Alina and Robert looked confused, sensing the sudden shift in atmosphere, the unexpected solemnity that had descended upon their joyous celebration. I stood beside Ethan, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but a newfound resolve, cold and sharp, coursing through my veins. The moment of reckoning had arrived. Ethan began calmly, his voice measured, laying out the timeline of Bethany's deceptive actions, starting with the smaller incidents that had, over time, created a cumulative effect of subtle erasure. He spoke of the subtly altered anecdotes she'd weave into conversations, the conveniently forgotten invitations that had led to my absence from family events, painting a picture of my perceived unreliability. He articulated the emotional isolation I had experienced, the creeping confusion caused by mixed messages, and how Bethany had systematically driven a wedge between me and our parents, meticulously eroding their trust in me. As he spoke, Bethany's composure began to crack. Her initial dismissive scoffing turned into agitated murmurs, then outright, angry interruptions. "Ethan, what on earth are you talking about? This is absurd." "You're being ridiculous," she interjected, her voice rising in pitch, a hint of desperation seeping in. Robert, my father, held up a hand, his expression stern, his gaze unwavering on Bethany. "Let him speak, Bethany. We will hear him out." Ethan then moved to the more egregious betrayals, the fabricated text messages to Alina, painting me as ungrateful and selfish, detailing precisely how Bethany had twisted my words and intentions beyond recognition. He showed the screenshots, the irrefutable, undeniable proof of her venomous lies, holding his phone out for our parents to see. Alina gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes darting frantically from the glowing screen to Bethany's rapidly paling face, as if seeing a ghost. The crescendo of Ethan's revelation came with the painful truth about the sapphire locket. He recounted Grandma's true intentions, her quiet promises to me, the countless times she had spoken of it belonging to me, to her artistic granddaughter. Then, with a quiet solemnity that underscored the gravity of his words, he presented the communication he had found where Bethany had subtly, maliciously, suggested that Grandma, in her final days, had been a bit confused about the locket's destination, subtly influencing Alina to believe Bethany was the rightful inheritor. "Bethany intentionally manipulated you, Mom, Dad," Ethan stated, his voice ringing with a newfound clarity, unwavering and strong. "She played on your grief, she exploited your trust, she twisted Grandma's words, all to get something she knew deep down was meant for Olivia." She convinced you that Olivia was being greedy, demanding, when all she felt was profound heartbreak and betrayal over a promise that was quietly broken by Bethany. The accusation hung in the air, thick with disbelief and a dawning horror. Bethany's face was a mask of pure fury, her eyes blazing with an almost manic intensity. "This is a lie. Olivia has poisoned your mind, Ethan. She's always been jealous of me, of our marriage, of everything I've built with you," she shrieked, her voice cracking with desperation, a thin veneer of control finally shattering. She turned frantically to Alina and Robert, her eyes pleading for their validation, for their intervention. Tell them Olivia is just dramatic. Tell them I've always been good to you. Tell them," but the undeniable evidence presented by their own son, their quiet, steady Ethan, spoke louder than her frantic denials, more powerfully than any desperate plea. The careful facade Bethany had maintained for years, the polished image of the perfect, selfless daughter-in-law, crumbled irrevocably before their very eyes, exposing the rot beneath. The dining room, moments ago filled with the echo of Bethany's desperate, high-pitched pleas, fell into a stunned, suffocating silence. The air crackled with the weight of raw emotions, a heavy tension that pressed down on everyone present. Alina's face was a roadmap of conflicting emotions. Initial shock giving way to disbelief, then a dawning, crushing realization of the magnitude of Bethany's deceit. Her lower lip trembled, and her eyes, usually so warm and discerning, now held a look of profound heartbreak. Robert's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitch, his eyes fixed on Bethany, a profound, chilling disappointment etched into his features. The silence was broken only by the almost imperceptible click of my father's thumb as he firmly pressed a button on his phone, ensuring the digital evidence Ethan had presented was secured, a quiet testament to his resolve. "Bethany," Robert finally said, his voice low and steady, stripped of any trace of his usual warmth or affection, "is this true? Did you deliberately manipulate Alina? Did you spread these lies about Olivia? All this deception?" Bethany, cornered, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her, lashed out one last, desperate time. "It's not fair. You always favored Olivia. She's always been the golden child, the artist, the one you adored. I just wanted to be part of this family, to be appreciated, to be loved like she was." Her true resentment, long simmering beneath the surface of her polished charm and manufactured perfection, erupted in a torrent of bitter accusations. A raw, uncontrolled confession that confirmed everything Ethan and I had alleged, every suspicion I had ever harbored. The raw, unfiltered fury in Bethany's confession sent a cold shiver through the room, silencing any lingering doubts. She wasn't just defending herself. She was, in her desperation, revealing a deep-seated, corrosive jealousy that had fueled her relentless campaign against me, a campaign spanning years. She accused Alina and Robert of favoritism, of constantly putting me on a pedestal, of never truly appreciating her own relentless efforts to be the perfect daughter-in-law. It was a desperate, transparent attempt to shift the blame, to portray herself as the victim of perceived injustice, to cast me as the villain in her twisted narrative. But her words, delivered in a shrill, uncontrolled tone, punctuated by her wild gesticulations, only solidified the undeniable truth of her malice, of her envy. Alina, initially speechless, her eyes wide with shock, slowly stood from her chair. Her gaze, filled with a mixture of pain and a dawning understanding, fixed on Bethany. No longer was there love or affection in her eyes, but a cold, clear disappointment that cut deeper than any words. "Bethany," she said, her voice trembling slightly, thick with unshed tears, "how could you do this? To Olivia, to us. We trusted you. We welcomed you into our family, into our home with open hearts. How could you repay that trust with such cruelty?" The weight of her words, delivered with quiet, heartbreaking sincerity, seemed to physically press down on Bethany, crushing her remaining facade. The carefully cultivated image of the devoted daughter-in-law, the one who always put family first, shattered into irreparable pieces, revealing the broken, envious woman beneath. Without another word, her face a contorted mask of pure rage and profound humiliation, Bethany abruptly turned. She stormed out of the dining room, her hurried, angry footsteps echoing through the silent house as she made her swift, dramatic exit. The sharp, resounding sound of the front door slamming shut reverberated through the quiet evening, signaling her definitive departure, leaving behind a vacuum of stunned silence. A collective sigh seemed to ripple through the remaining family members, a mixture of shock, profound relief, and perhaps a lingering sense of bewildered sadness. Eleanor and Robert immediately turned to me, their eyes now filled with profound regret, with an unspoken apology that transcended words. "Olivia," Eleanor whispered, her voice thick with emotion, tears finally welling in her eyes and tracing paths down her cheeks. "I am so sorry. We were so blind. We should have listened to you. We should have seen it." Robert placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm and comforting, a silent anchor in the swirling chaos. "Your mother and we allowed ourselves to be misled. We truly believed Bethany had only the best intentions. We saw her as helpful, as generous. Please forgive us, honey." The apologies were raw, heartfelt, and for the first time in years I felt a genuine connection with my parents, a fragile thread of trust beginning to reform, slowly, carefully. It was painful, undeniably so, but it was honest. And that honesty, that naked admission of error, was a soothing balm to my bruised soul, a balm I had longed for. In a quiet, poignant moment that followed, after the initial shock had begun to recede, Eleanor briefly excused herself from the dining room. She returned a few minutes later, her hands cradling a small, velvet-lined mahogany box, its soft interior gleaming. As she opened it, the familiar gleam of antique gold and deep blue stones caught the light, illuminating the sapphire locket. Its beauty was breathtaking, just as I remembered. Her hands trembled slightly as she presented it to me. "Olivia," she said, her voice thick with emotion, with tears that mirrored my own, "this was always meant for you. Grandma loved you so very much, and she would have wanted you to have this. It was a mistake that it wasn't given to you sooner, a grave error on our part." She pressed the locket into my palm. Its familiar weight felt comforting, a profound and powerful symbol not just of Grandma's enduring love, but also of truth finally prevailing, of integrity restored. It was a quiet, symbolic act of reconciliation, a powerful acknowledgement of the years of subtle betrayal and the reassertion of my rightful place within the family's affection and history. Ethan, ever my protector, ever my unwavering support, placed a comforting arm around my shoulders, his presence a silent testament to our renewed bond, a clear demarcation against Bethany's destructive influence. The initial tension in the room slowly began to dissipate, replaced by the hesitant beginnings of a genuine dialogue, a painful but necessary start to a long, arduous process of healing, a process built on vulnerability and forgiveness. The days and weeks following the confrontation were a period of raw, necessary healing. The immediate aftermath had been messy, emotionally draining, and profoundly uncomfortable for everyone involved. But it had laid bare the festering wounds that had silently festered beneath our family's polished, almost perfect surface. Ethan and I found ourselves closer than ever before, our bond forged anew in the crucible of shared pain and the triumphant, undeniable power of truth. We spent hours talking, day and night, reliving past incidents, meticulously piecing together the subtle threads of Bethany's manipulation that had once seemed innocuous, harmless, or merely quirks of her personality. He expressed profound remorse for his earlier blindness, for his unwitting complicity, for not seeing how his wife's unbridled ambition and deep-seated jealousy had quietly, insidiously poisoned our family dynamic, tearing us apart from within. "I should have known, Liv," he'd often say, his voice heavy with regret, his eyes clouded with a sorrow that mirrored mine. I wanted to believe the best. I wanted to believe in her goodness. I dismissed your feelings, and for that, I will never forgive myself." Our conversations, though often difficult and fraught with painful revelations, deepened our understanding of each other, allowing us to build a foundation of honesty and trust that had been sorely lacking for too many years. He became my unwavering advocate, a staunch defender against any lingering whispers or insidious attempts by Bethany to regain control or sow further discord. His support was my anchor, his newfound clarity a beacon guiding us through the murky waters of betrayal. My relationship with Alina and Robert began a slow, deliberate mend, a fragile process of rebuilding trust brick by painstaking brick. They were profoundly ashamed of how easily they had been swayed by Bethany's charms, how their desire for a perfect family image and their blind trust had ultimately blinded them to the subtle emotional abuse and manipulation I had endured right under their very noses. Alina would call me often, not with casual small talk or superficial updates, but with earnest apologies, her voice thick with emotion, and a genuine, profound desire to reconnect, to truly understand my pain. She listened, truly listened, with an open heart and an attentive ear, as I voiced years of suppressed feelings, of quiet resentments, of unspoken hurts. And she, in turn, shared her own regrets, her own feelings of guilt and confusion, her tears mirroring mine as we navigated the emotional landscape of healing. Robert, less verbal but equally sincere, made quiet yet powerful gestures of support. A reassuring squeeze of my hand during a silent moment, a knowing glance across the dinner table that conveyed his deep understanding, a renewed emphasis on spending quality time with just me, rebuilding our individual connection. They actively worked to dismantle the false narratives Bethany had so meticulously built, openly affirming my place in the family, acknowledging my artistic career with pride and genuine interest, and ensuring all future family communications were direct and transparent, free from Bethany's interference or manipulation. The sapphire locket, now securely in my possession, no longer just an heirloom, became a tangible symbol of their renewed trust and a quiet, profound promise of a more authentic, honest future for our family. As for Bethany Sterling, her karmic reckoning unfolded quietly but decisively, a slow, inevitable unraveling of her carefully constructed life. Ethan, unwilling to endure a marriage built on lies, manipulation, and emotional abuse, initiated a period of separation, a necessary boundary. He demanded she seek professional therapy to address her destructive patterns, emphasizing that their relationship and her place in the family depended on her genuine commitment to change. Her perfectly curated image, once her greatest asset, her shining shield, was shattered irrevocably within our family circle. The relatives who had once admired her organizational skills, her social graces, and her seemingly selfless devotion now viewed her with wary eyes, a subtle but palpable distance in their interactions. They were aware, finally, of her capacity for deep deception. Her attempts to host or organize family events were met with polite but firm refusals. The excuses varied but the message clear. Her phone calls to Alina and Robert became less frequent, her attempts to rekindle the old manipulations and gossip falling on deaf ears, their resolve against her tactics now firm. She slowly but surely lost her influential position as the family's social planner, her meticulously crafted image of selfless devotion utterly dismantled, replaced by a reputation for deceit. The social isolation, a quiet but potent form of karmic revenge, left her visibly diminished, her once bright spark dimmed, no longer able to exert her poisonous influence over our family or indeed her own reputation. Her public humiliation at the anniversary celebration and her subsequent loss of control led to a profound and irreversible shift in her own personal and social standing, a direct and undeniable consequence of her manipulative actions. With Bethany's toxic presence removed, or at least significantly contained, a profound sense of peace began to settle over our family, a quiet calm that had been absent for far too long. We began to forge new traditions, built not on outward appearances or forced obligations, but on genuine connection, authentic communication, and a shared commitment to honesty. Our gatherings became smaller, more intimate, characterized by easy laughter, heartfelt conversations, and a renewed, deep appreciation for each other's unique personalities and quirks. The locket, once a source of bitter contention and hidden pain, was now a cherished symbol of my grandmother's enduring love, a tangible link to a legacy that had been reclaimed, and the undeniable resilience of truth within our family. I, Olivia, found a renewed sense of belonging, a deep-seated calm and security that had eluded me for years, a feeling of finally being truly seen and accepted for who I was, not who Bethany wanted me to be. Life, with all its inherent complexities and challenges, began to feel lighter, more vibrant, filled with the warmth of genuine relationships and the quiet joy of authenticity. The journey to healing hadn't been easy, nor had it been swift, but it had ultimately led us back to each other, stronger and more honest for having faced the painful truths that had festered in the shadows. We learned, through heartbreak and revelation, that true family isn't about perfection or carefully constructed appearances. It's about enduring love, unwavering support, and the profound courage to confront the darkness in order to truly find the light. It is about forgiveness, understanding, and the relentless pursuit of truth, even when it hurts. Have you ever experienced a similar situation or felt the sting of betrayal from someone you thought was family? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story touched something in you, make sure to subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear that truth, though sometimes painful, always sets you free, and genuine connections are the bedrock of true belonging. Thank you for listening to Olivia's story, and remember that the most profound healing often begins with the courage to face the uncomfortable truths.